Hello, New Stoics. This is Tim, and today we are looking at different kinds of philosophies and philosophers. So, tonight we are going to look at the school of cynicism, which is not the colloquial term cynical or being a cynic. It's actually uh, a precursor to Stoicism, and some say a separate branch of Stoicism from Socrates' teachings of virtue ethics. So, I mean, all these kind of things are disputed, but it is known that cynic ideas are very prominent in Stoicism. Now, there's some very stark differences between cynicism and Stoicism, but for the most part, they both follow virtue ethics and they both follow this idea of using reason to make good, sound judgments. The difference is the cynics were not afraid to step outside of the norm in society and government and social settings. So to them, virtue is more important than how others view you, how you excel in society, or what you should do in your social life. So getting a promotion or being the best that you can in a certain field is not as important as being a good person or doing the right thing. So the cynics a lot of times lived as hermits, and uh, you could say that they were very avid hikers, hunters gatherer kind of people. They were very tough. They exercised a lot. They were practiced fighting and wrestling, and they uh, lived in poverty. They saw poverty as almost being a virtue, and a lot of these ideas originated. Well, I shouldn't say all, but some of the main philosophy of cynicism comes from this figure Diogenes, who was very prominent around 400 to 300 BC, and we don't really know anything about his early life. His life is full of legends. We don't really know if they actually happened or not, as many of his writings were not from himself. They actually come from other writers, such as Diogenes Laertius, who wrote of many different philosophers, including Plato and Aristotle and the pre-Socratics. But Diogenes was a very avid critic of society and how it functions. He was also a very big critic of Plato, and he would have many different confrontations with Plato throughout his life, or so it's that we learn of Diogenes. Is his father was a minter of coins, and we learn that he he was actually exiled from uh, from his home because he was debasing the currency. So that gives you a really good idea of who this person is, and where his loyalties or lack of loyalty lies. To him, there is no master except virtue. There is no person. There is no loyalty to a country or anything, as he always considered himself a person of the globe. Uh, he lived, or it's said he lived with dogs, and he lived in uh, a big clay pot. And like I said before, we don't really know if this is true, but he was known to beg for scraps, and many people told him that he was a dog. They called him Diogenes the dog, which I think that's what his name means in Greek, the dog. So the thing that I want to stress about him is he had this idea that we don't necessarily have to follow societal norms to be a good person. And things like making money and going about your routine are not really that important. They don't make you a good person. In fact, they could stop you from being a good person. And many times they just flat out don't make any sense. He had many lessons about just how we view power and politics. There was a story of when Alexander the Great met Diogenes, and just like before, this is a legend. We don't really know if it's true or not. But anyways, Alexander, who actually was a big fan of Diogenes based on his notoriety, and which he actually had quite a bit of during his time, apparently. And Alexander was excited to meet him, and he asked if there's any favor he might do for Diogenes. And Diogenes replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." Alexander then declared, "If I were not Alexander, then I should wish to be a Diogenes. If I were not Diogenes, I would still be Diogenes." Diogenes replied. This man did not view power in a pragmatic sense, I should say. Alexander the Great was a very powerful man and could hold his life into danger if he wanted to, but Diogenes didn't care. He was going to live the same way he died. And I mean, he didn't really live a glamorous life. He lived in poverty. He eventually at one point got sold into slavery, and he just he resembles Socrates in a way, except for Socrates did enjoy, ordinary life. He held that being, a part of the political process was important and all these different things. But the thing to keep in mind is, though these stories are legends, we have a good idea that this man actually existed, and he laid the groundwork for the Cynics, and not just for a specific school of adherence to virtue ethics, but to a group of people that would later on form the Stoics. And though they are different in many different ways, they share same roots. And I think we as Stoics should follow some of the lessons of the Cynics, that we shouldn't be afraid to question authority. We shouldn't be afraid to put our virtues ahead of pragmatic politics, and that sometimes we should just take a step back and realize that sometimes our daily routine is kind of silly. The way that we put importance on technology is extremely silly. Maybe we just need to put our phones down and go into the mountains and just fend off the land like the Cynics did. Maybe we should do that. Have a good night, everyone.